Welcome to Mind, Body, Soul Mastery, the podcast where transformative journeys unfold through authentic conversations. I'm your host, Brenda Staat-Tomlinson, your guide on this exploration of self-discovery, resilience, and holistic well-being. Join us as we dive deep into the interconnected realms of mind, body, and soul, unraveling the wisdom gained from the messy, the challenging, and sometimes the most heartbreaking moments in life. Get ready for deep and meaningful dialogue that inspires and cultivates empowerment. This is Mind, Body, Soul Mastery. Hello, and welcome to the Mind, Body, Soul Mastery podcast. On today's show, I have with me Karen Hall. Karen has been a life coach on health, wellness, nutrition, weight loss, and lactation for decades. She recently decided that her real love is coaching on parenting, nervous system regulation, and relationships. Yet today, Karen is here to talk about losing her dad and how that still impacts her 20 years later. Karen, thank you for being a guest on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. And yes, I have had many experiences with grief in my life. And so it has been a lifelong journey to learn how to deal with grief. And
Yeah.
so the biggest loss that I have had in my life is the loss of my dad. And I was born 2.5 months premature. I weighed 1 pound, 13 ounces shortly after birth. And
Wow.
they told my mom and dad that I wasn't going to live. But I did. And then they said, well, if she survives, she'll be a vegetable. And I'm not.
And you're not.
Thank goodness. What a miracle. And I believe that it was miraculous that I defied the odds and overcame death. And so my dad was always a champion in my life. He always told me I was Miss America and that I could do anything. And he just believed in me. I was a little shy in some ways. I still to this day have this complex that I'm behind. Like when I remember my somebody asked me, when's the first time you remembered that? And I remembered when I went to like a preschool group. Well, I must have joined after everybody else joined because everybody knew all the songs. Everybody knew the routine, where to go, what to do. I didn't know what to do. And I remember thinking, I'm so far behind. Everybody knows what to do. I don't. But my dad always believed in me that I could figure it out. And my mom was always encouraging me. And so I think it was because of being premature, I had
Sure.
some issues with nervous system regulation. And so my mom was always trying to help me when I felt afraid. And I did have a lot of fears. So she told me the story of the little engine that could as my bedtime story. And I love that story. And I still love that story. And I think of myself as the little engine that could. And in fact, that became my first mantra. And I remember when I would be afraid, my mom would say, just think of the little engine that could. And I would think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And I still do it when I'm getting on stage. I say that as I'm walking up to the microphone. And so my mom and dad both played a very important role in my life, but my dad's personality was like mine. And so we thought very similarly, and he would notice my gifts. He would tell me, you have a gift of perceiving things. You connect with people. You pick up on nuances really quickly. And so he would point out these things to me, which I cherish those things because sometimes when I'm in difficult situations and my emotions are escalated and I can't even remember what to do, or sometimes my dad's words will come back to me.
Wow.
I have a gift to know how to deal with this situation. Sometimes I have to de-escalate a little bit before the memory comes back.
Yeah.
But I miss him terribly because even after I was gone, I would call him on the phone all the time and just talk to him. And he always had the encouraging words that he believed that I could figure difficult things out. And he often would say to me, you have this ability in this way. He would say, I have a vision of you doing this thing. And everything that he saw came to pass.
Yeah.
And so So the other thing that one of the stories that he liked to tell me, which some people might not think this is a compliment, but he always liked to tell me the story of the ugly duckling. And he said, you may feel like the ugly duckling, but you're really a swan inside. And he said, and you are going to blossom, and you might be a late blossomer, because he said, I was a late blossomer, but you're a swan inside. And so even though I did struggle with self-esteem in my preteen years and things, I had to wear glasses, and I felt very self-conscious about that. He just always told me how beautiful I was, and how I was a swan. And so that thought was always in my mind. And he said, when you get older, he said, people are going to say, you're how old? I can't believe that. You have such a young face. He would always tell me things like that.
Yeah.
And so when he died, it was very sudden. And again, miraculously, I felt divine inspiration to go and visit him. My dad was also born premature, and so he was resuscitated in the oven in a shoebox. And so I think there were some connections probably he probably was sensitive. I know my dad was sensitive, and he was an empath. I don't know if he was a highly sensitive person, because I don't remember all the details about things,
Sure.
but I know I'm a highly sensitive person, and he appreciated that about me. But when he had some health issues when I was young. And so when I was 11, he had quadruple bypass surgery. And so I always worried, and I always wanted to remember everything about him. I interviewed him all the time. Tell me the stories about when you were a boy. Tell me about, he sold newspapers when he was a young boy, and to support the family. And he always supported his family, and he was just so generous. And so I would just talk to him about all those things. And so when he had heart disease, I was like, oh no, am I going to lose him? And so I cherished every moment with him. Not every moment, but I tried to cherish every moment,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
because he did have some health concerns. So when we went, I just had this feeling that I should go and visit him, and it was at Christmas. And so I went and took two of my kids with me. Two of my other kids were with my husband, and when I was there, I felt very strongly, you need to come back. And we lived several states away, and so it wasn't convenient to come back, but I felt you need to come back at Easter and bring the whole family. So I told my husband, he's like, you were just there. Why do we need to go back again? And I said, I don't know, but I just need to go. Well, when I went back, we had a wonderful visit with my dad, and 2 or 3 days later, he suddenly passed away. And what
Wow.
happened, it was so sudden that my mom forgot to call me. And so my brother and sister, who lived close by, they were about an hour away, they came to the hospital. And so then she called me after he passed. And the grief was so great that I didn't get to say goodbye to
Yeah.
dad. And then as I was processing that and grieving, I was really sad that I didn't get to say goodbye, because it was so sudden. Nobody had any idea that this was going to happen.
Yeah.
The sweetest thought came to me from my dad. I felt his words in my mind. We had the best time when you were here just a couple days ago. And thank you for coming. And I was like, I'm so grateful. I paid
Yes.
attention to that nudge to get
Yeah.
there, because one of the things that happened was we were just talking, and he just told me all the things he loved about me. And he told me memories. I remember when you did this for me. I remember when you cared about me this way, and thoughtful things. I remember when you called me, and I missed you. He was telling me, I missed you so much when you went away to college, and when you got married and moved away. And he said, you just have been such a special daughter to me. Oh my goodness.
Aw.
What a gift.
What a gift. Yes.
What a gift, because my other siblings didn't have that conversation. They did get to say goodbye to him, but mine was even more precious
Yeah.
in light of what happened. And so when I would go through times where I would miss talking to somebody who really understood my personality, I would imagine conversations with my dad, and I would often say, what would my dad say right now? And I would just be still, and I would just try to imagine that he was right there. I have a picture of him right next to my bed, and it's the last picture that we took together. And it just makes my heart so happy to see him, but then to hear him, to hear the words in my mind of his voice brings me so much comfort. And so I went through deep mourning. But on the flip side of it, I was I was filled with memories. I went down the memory lane as I was grieving. I was thinking about, I remember my dad taught me to ride a bike, and he would run next to me. He was always so patient. He didn't get annoyed with things like that. Like some dads are like, I'm too busy for that, but not my dad. And my dad was thrilled to be a dad. He just couldn't wait to be a dad. And so I was the first baby, and so I just started remembering those things, and yet it was bittersweet because I wish that I had more of that. I mean,
Yeah.
I felt a little greedy because I had such a loving dad, where a lot of people don't have that. But I missed that. I missed that during my hard
Yeah.
times in life. My dad was always very compassionate and supportive, and so I went through the different stages of loss.
Hmm.
And as I went through the stages of loss, I thought they were linear. I thought first you're in shock
Mm.
and you're bargaining, and I knew about the stages of grief, but I thought it was linear. And so when I went back to shock again, I was like, I can't believe this happened. I was like, wait, I thought I was past shock. and and what I learned from that was things would out of the blue, something would happen. Like I called my dad Poppy. And so when I see poppies blooming and I see them in the
Mm.
weirdest places at the weird out of season, when it's like my dad sending me a message, I'm here.
Mhm. Right?
um, I would, I would, ha- I would, sometimes I'd have to grieve again. Sometimes it would be bittersweet. Sometimes I would have a sweet memory of him, but then I would miss him again even
Yeah.
more and wish that I could just pick up the phone and call him and hear what advice he would give me. But I do ask my dad to help me. I had to give a big speech at an event, and I was saying my prayers, and I said, Dad, will you come and stand with me and put your arm around me? Like you always had faith in me that I could do it. Will you come and do
Yeah.
it again? And sometimes I ask him to go help my kids when they're doing hard things, and I'll say, Poppy's going to be with you when you have to do that thing.
Mm.
So I feel like he's still very much a part of our life. And that is the biggest comfort of all, because I know
Yes.
people, um, they that same connection, after their loved one passes, and they only rely on memories. And I know that even after 20 years, there are times that I can't remember what my dad's voice sounded like. Luckily, because I was so fascinated with his life, I have audio recordings and I have video recordings. And so we have him telling his stories. And every time I watch those, I'm just crying, crying, crying.
Yeah.
Because I want to just hug him. And I feel like I can because he's right there and moving and talking. And, but I learned many lessons about grief. One was that it wasn't linear. The other was that sometimes things just came out of the blue, and all of a sudden I would be filled with grief again. And three, I learned many things. So I have more than three. I don't even think I can number them. But one of the sweet things was that life was sweeter because I appreciated things more. The other
Mm.
people in my life, you never know what
Right.
what is going to happen tomorrow. And my mom always said that when we would leave to go to school, if we were visiting and we were going back home, she would always say, I love you and I want to leave on a happy note. I don't want to have any difficulty, because you never know
Yes.
what we're not
Yes.
guaranteed tomorrow. So
Yes.
that was a beautiful principle that I grew up with, and so that's helped me with other
Yeah.
relationships. It's not worth the the issue. It's
Right.
I want to have love in my heart as much as I can. There are times when we're still in the process of working towards that,
Mm.
but that helped me also to cherish the things that I had. And I don't know what it is about human nature, but sometimes we don't appreciate things as much until after we don't have them. And
Right.
and
Right.
then we start to reflect back, and I've heard so many people say, I wish I would have made that a priority. I wish that I wouldn't have let that thing come between us or whatever. And they wish they could go back and do it over again. And the comforting thing to me is knowing that our relationship continues, that we can still have conversations with them. We can still say, I say to my dad, I'm sorry when I think of something. Oh, I think, I don't know if I said I'm sorry for that. Dad, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I just feel that warm hug again. And but the other thing that I learned about grief was I did not I did not understand in myself that many times when my emotions were escalated, it was related to grief and some kind of loss. Many times, not related to my dad, but other losses. And so grieving the experience with my dad made grief much more tangible. And I remember I knew people that had lost a child or had gone through a death of a spouse or different things. And I remember not knowing what to say. I wish that I could think of the perfect thing to say. And I would listen to what people would say, and I would sometimes cringe and think, oh, I definitely don't want to say that. But sometimes I just didn't know exactly what to say. And so I would just give people hugs because I just didn't know. And I remember one of my friends, her child had died of leukemia. And she said, I remember, she told me this years later. She said, I remember when you saw me in the grocery store and you came and gave me a hug and you just held me. And she said, that was the best gift. She said, you didn't say anything. You just held me. And I thought, I didn't know it impacted her that way. I just wanted her to feel loved in that moment. So that was something that I learned about grief, was that many times for myself, when I am grieving, if someone will just be with me, they don't even have to know what to say. And I thought, all those years prior, I thought, I need to think of how to say the best thing or what I can say that will be comforting and help them. And then I realized, no, I don't have to do that. I can just be with them. That was a sweet lesson that I learned.
Yeah. It sounds like you grew up with very supportive parents who both saw you very clearly and were able to articulate your authentic self. That in and of itself is such a gift.
It is a gift. They weren't perfect. They
Who
made
is?
mistakes. Yeah. And there were things that we had differences of opinion even growing up and things. And because my mom thought I was too sensitive. And she would tell me, you were too sensitive. And that is something that I have grieved, because my dad never said, your sensitivity is a gift, but he was telling me that in other words. So it wasn't until after I was married and in college, I realized, oh, my dad was telling me my sensitivity is a gift. And then it took even more years to realize my mom was trying to protect me. My mom was worried about me. She saw her little girl get her feelings hurt so easily, and she didn't want me to be grieving so many times. And it hurt her to see me hurting.
Yeah.
And then when I was able to understand my mom's protective feeling, and sometimes it came out as annoyance because I think my mom felt helpless. She didn't know how to help me, and she didn't understand it.
Right.
Either.
Yes.
And so, but when
I'm highly sensitive too, so I'm
Are you
shaking my head because I'm like, I so get it. I've been told that you're too sensitive, and been there.
So that was something that I grieved for many years, that I was too sensitive. And the other thing I grieved,
like it was a bad thing.
like it was a bad thing.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah. And I would look around at other people when they got their feelings hurt and they would just get over it. And I remember my mom said to me, just be like a duck and let it roll off your back. And I was like, my back has Velcro on it. So what to do? I don't know how you do what you do. It was like this twitching my ear kind of thing. I couldn't figure it out. And I remember when Elsa came out, just let it go, let it go. And I thought, that has been something that I have grieved in my personality, that I couldn't let it go like other people can let it go. And because I
it takes a lot of work to let it go.
Yeah, I felt
like layer and layer and layer of letting. Yes.
Layer and layer. So that was another huge lesson in grief for me. And when my emotions get escalated and I'm feeling loss or I'm feeling shame, then I don't realize that I'm grieving something. And what's so fascinating is that I'm trying to make sense of it. I'm trying to figure out what happened. I could feel it in my body. I'm baffled. Wait, what happened? And oftentimes I'll be talking to one of my kids about it, and they'll say, Mom, you're grieving. Like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm grieving. And that is so helpful for me to understand that many times if I'm not understanding that I'm feeling a loss, I can't process it as well. But when I can see it for what it is, and I'm like, it's like the name it to tame it thing. I'm like, right, it's a loss, then I can comfort myself in that moment, and then
Yes.
to emotionally regulate.
Yes. One of the things that I like to just I remind people all the time is grief is like what you've just said. Grief is more than the loss of someone physically. Like if you've been divorced or had custody changes or any of those things, you've gone through grief. If you've been a single parent, if you've the loss of illusion, if you had a career that you wanted and something happened, you couldn't get it, you have gone through grief. That loss, for me, one of my biggest, well, besides losing my adult son, my awareness came that I've been grieving most of my life for unmet expectations and just having this, what family means, what holidays mean, what marriage means, like all these expectations that didn't happen, right? And so it's its own level of sadness and grief.
Yes, that is so true, and I had to learn that lesson too, because
Yeah.
I had very high expectations. Being a highly sensitive person and an empath, I felt things so deeply, and I was very conscientious, and I didn't understand when somebody could be thoughtless without thinking of it. And that just was
Right.
baffling to me because I'm like, wait, why would
Right.
you say that thing? And they're like, oh, I didn't mean it. I'm like, well, then why would you say it?
Right. Yes. I so get that.
No, I had to learn a lot about accepting and lowering those expectations, and
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that many times it was just a simple misunderstanding.
Yeah.
It didn't have the meaning attached to it that I thought it did, because that caused a lot of grief in my life that was unnecessary grief.
Yes.
So sometimes I grieved when I misinterpreted things.
Absolutely. And that's such a key word, just these attachment, like what our perception and our attachment to words and things without, like what you just said, I misunderstood. So when we choose not to ask the question or choose not to clarify, right? Those attachments and those perceptions lead to that sadness, that sorrow, that misunderstanding that leads to grief, right?
Yes, and that grief is so painful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just constant. So, with where you were and where you are now, what aspects, like, I think you might have touched on this a little bit, but what do you do to help yourself now as those moments come?
Yeah, so I have a couple clues now, because I've seen this pattern so much in my own
Mm-hmm.
life, that the first thing that happens to me is I'm stunned. So I first go through
Mm,
the shock, and I have so everybody laughs when I say it. I can't believe that just happened. Or some variation. I can't believe that person did that thing or whatever. And
yeah.
that's my first thing that I think and say after I'm shocked. That's the first thing that comes
Mm,
out of my mouth or in my mind. And I remember I was talking to my coach, and we were talking about my processing and how and she heard this pattern in me that I didn't even know as a pattern.
mm.
And she said, "Do you realize that you have a pattern that helps you to move through the grief?" And I said, "No, what is it?"
Yeah.
And she said, "First, you're in shock. Second, you're curious, and you're wondering what happened and why did it happen." And she said, "And then the next thing that I do is I use my imagination, and I think, what could that person have possibly meant if I was going to give them the benefit of the doubt, so that,
Mm,
or what what possible good thing could be coming out of this situation that I can't see? Could I look at this?" The question that I ask is, how can I look at this differently? And am I
mm.
willing? Sometimes
That's
I'm
a
not even
beautiful question.
Sometimes I'm not willing. So the question is, am I willing to look at this differently? And then if I
Yeah.
am, how can I look at this differently? And that is, I heard a quote that Marianne Williamson said to me, and she said that when you're willing to look at things differently, that's when miracles happen.
Mm,
That has been the case with me, because if you and I are at an impasse and I think you're the enemy, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm-hmm.
maybe draw a line in the sand and put you over there in that category, that blocks my ability to love. And
Yes.
there is a block between us. But if I set that aside and I say, okay, how can I look at this differently? Maybe Brenda was having a bad day. Maybe this has nothing to do with me. Maybe this is something that's going on. How could I look at this through Brenda's eyes? And how could I have empathy for Brenda? What maybe if I showed love to Brenda first and seek to understand her first,
Mm,
then we could come together. And I've seen that a million times over, that if I seek to understand the other person first, their defenses come down
yeah.
and they
Oh,
feel,
so much truth there. Yeah.
yes, and they feel cared about, they feel loved, and then they don't feel the need to attack back because they've
Mm-hmm.
perceived something as an attack.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people will, when I coach on this, people will say, yeah, but what about my feelings? And I say, your feelings are very important and we are not going to ignore your feelings. It's just a matter of timing. And so if
Yeah.
you can be the one that reaches out to seek to understand first, then later, then there will be the opportunity for you to be understood and you will have more understanding because the person will reduce their dysregulation. They won't have all those
Yes.
emotions that are out of whack. Their defenses won't be up. They'll
Yeah.
be more open and they will feel your love and they will have more love to give to be able to understand. And the irony is that many times in my life, once I seek to understand the other person and then I see what they see and I'm like, oh goodness, that makes so much sense why they did what they did. I don't even need to explain myself because I'm like,
Right. Right.
there's no issue anymore because
Right.
I understand where they were coming from.
Yes.
And 99 times out of 100, it's because either they misperceived something in me or they have something else going on that had nothing to do with me. And then we both forgive and we feel love again and it's just glorious. And then the grief passes and I celebrate. Woo!
Yes. Oh, that's such a powerful process. Thank you so much for sharing that. One final
I
question.
didn't tell all about how I emotionally regulate myself, but that's the brief overview of that.
Yes. Yes. Well, so just share, what are some ways that someone could emotionally regulate, self-regulate?
So one of the first things is I have to show compassion for myself. I have to
Mm,
offer grace to myself and one of the most important things for me as a highly sensitive person that has had a pattern of having a hard time of letting go of things is I've learned to tell myself, it's okay if you feel this way and you
mm,
can take as long as you need. I never heard that growing up. And to
yeah.
me, that's like a warm, cozy blanket that somebody is making a safe space for me. I'm making it for myself, but I feel like someone's making it for me. And I feel nurtured in that. And when I feel nurtured and I feel safe, I feel seen and heard to myself.
Mm, mm-hmm.
But it's almost like it's somebody else that's seeing and hearing me.
Right.
I,
Right.
I'm able to feel the feelings. And then as I feel those feelings, I can move through those feelings. I come back to my prefrontal cortex so much quicker then. And then I can remember my tools. I have little tools and little mantras and things that I say. But it's loving myself and having compassion for myself that is critical at that moment.
Yeah. And it's important too to just say and point out that emotions are a communication tool. They're messages from our body. And we need to give ourselves permission to feel them in
Yes.
order so that they can pass and move through us
Yes.
versus getting trapped in our bodies. And then all that negative energy comes out some way, which is usually not ever nice or joyful for anyone that's around you.
Right. Absolutely.
So, yeah, thank you for sharing.
You're so welcome.
So, if you think about our conversation, what would be one thing you'd like our listeners to walk away with, take away, or ponder about?
Well, one of the things that I often think about is if we had a precious child that was hurting and was grieving a loss, maybe they lost their puppy or something, we would most of the time care for that child. We would bring that child close to us. We would hug that child. If we were whole brained, we would offer compassion to that child and we wouldn't dismiss their concerns. We would say, I'm
Mm,
sorry you feel that way. And if we can do that same kind of behavior and same conversation to ourselves and show ourselves that same love, that healing is ongoing. And
Yes.
we build that ability to grieve. We go through the process. And like you said, then we can have that emotion pass through us. But I really believe that if we can sometimes it's hard to do that for ourselves. But if we can think of how we do that, if we had a precious child in our life or somebody that we loved, or even a pet that was hurting, how would we show love to that other person or pet that was hurting? And then use that same love towards ourselves. The irony is that, first of all, we move through it in a manner that is a healthy way. And second of all, we have greater love within us to give to someone else who is grieving.
Yes. Yes. So true. So true. And I might just say this. It can be very hard to give myself the grace and the kindness and the compassion that I would give to another. I know
practice. It really
takes so much practice, and over and over and over again. And it's so worth doing.
It is so worth doing. And like I was talking about my kids, sometimes when I'll say something to myself, like, I can't believe here I am, a life coach. I should know. I should have remembered that thing. I should be doing better with whatever it is. And my kids will say to me, Mom, would you say that to me if I forgot? Or if I wasn't using the tools that I knew? You've taught me these things. And what if I forgot and I didn't use these things? Would you say that to me? And I'm like, well, no, I'd never say that to you. That sometimes they'll say, would you say that to your client? I'm like, well, no, of course I wouldn't say that to you or my client. And then they'll say, well, then don't say it to yourself.
Beautiful mirrors you have there.
Beautiful, beautiful mirrors, powerful mirrors. My children are such powerful mirrors in my life. And it is so sweet to hear them teach me the things that I have taught them through my painful experiences. And now they reflect it back to me. So it is an ongoing circle of love.
Which is lovely. What a beautiful. Thank you so much, Karen, for coming on the show. I totally believe that there have been so many insights and awarenesses shared today that will inspire anyone who's listening who may be dealing with grief in whatever form to be able to.
I wanted to say that if someone is grieving in whatever form, we wouldn't grieve if we didn't care. If you didn't care about that job, if you didn't care about that relationship, you wouldn't have grief. And so that's a message to yourself. Oh, I cared. And that's why I'm grieving. I was gonna share with that. That helped me too.
Yeah. Yes. Very good. So thank you so much for being on the Mind, Body, Soul Mastery podcast.
Thank you, Brenda. It was a joy. It was a joy to go down memory lane, and it was a joy to reflect on the lessons I have learned. So thank you for asking, and thank you for wanting to know, because you blessed my life today.
Ah, so good. Thank you. Thank you for being part of today's journey. I hope our time together brought you moments of insight, heightened awareness, and a spark of empowerment. If this episode resonated with you, I encourage you to share it with a friend. You can connect with me or today's guest through the show notes. I'm always here to offer support to guide you deeper on your path. Remember, Mind, Body, Soul Mastery is a continuous journey of growth. Be gentle with yourself as your awareness deepens. Grace and compassion will guide you forward. Until next time, I'm Brenda Staat-Tomlinson, here to guide you as you embrace your journey of mind, body, soul mastery.